Good evening, everybody. Kamari Ellis here, the Finance Rebel. I want to thank everybody for joining us. We are at the hour, the money hour. We do the money hour every Wednesday from 7 to 8. And this week we are blessed to have Miss Courtney Richardson, a.k.a. the Ivy Investor, to come on with us and talk about the marijuana industry and how to make money in the marijuana industry. Courtney is a resident of Philadelphia. She did her undergrad at Pitt. She was actually a philosophy major. Spent many, many years on Wall Street at Merrill Lynch as a stockbroker and financial advisor, and then decided to become a lawyer. And she started working with oil and gas companies. I know Courtney went to, West Virginia University for law school, and now she is currently an LLM, which basically is a master's in taxation on the law side. So Courtney has a plethora of knowledge when it comes to money, investments, and the law, and they all coincide and they all go together. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. And part of the reason why I wanted Courtney to come on, she's a good friend of mine, but the other reason I wanted to come on is she did this really deep dive on the marijuana industry. And it's not necessarily just from a straight investment perspective, and it's not necessarily straight from a legal perspective, but she's merging the two to see how it's most beneficial for people to truly make money and avoid getting into problems when they go into their industry. And just to give you a little bit of backstory on this, I don't know if anybody saw the preview video I shot, but recently I talked about an IPO of a weed company in Canada called Tilray. And so a viewer / friend of mine from years ago said that I blew her off when she asked me about weed previously ago, or investing in weed years ago. And I told her I wasn't interested in it because by law on the federal level, it's illegal. Now we have a whole lot of states, Colorado, Washington, even in Pennsylvania, where me and Courtney are at, it's approved on a medicinal level, but there's still issues with states and with the federal government. So that's a whole other risk issue that many people aren't concerned about when it comes to weed investing in something. And since I'm a professional, I really don't want to deal with it because I can't really navigate or map that out. Yes, weed is a great industry and it's got great potential, but just investing from the United States side is a bit iffy. But then Tilray came along. They're in Canada, and they have a worldwide distribution network. And so I thought it was really, really interesting. And actually, I brought some myself, and I did a whole video on it. And so that's why she came back to me and said, "What are you doing? You basically forgot about me and you threw me under the bus and thought I was crazy." So I said, all right, I'll get Courtney on because Courtney has done a much deeper dive on this than I have from an industry and legal and political landscape. So I'll turn it over to Courtney now. How are you, Courtney?
I'm good. How are you? Thank you for having me on.
No, thank you for taking the time for joining me. I know you're a busy lady.
I mean, a little bit.
Now, Courtney, I'm getting a little feedback from your side. Is your volume up on the IG?
All right, let's see. Hold on. How's that?
Still here.
You still have the feedback?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure how to fix that. That's not my thing. So what I can do.
Is your phone up?
My phone is up. I can turn off my phone.
Turn it down. Just turn it down.
Turn it down?
Yep. Turn the volume down on the phone.
Okay, I turned the volume down.
Yep, we're good.
Okay, we're good? Perfect.
So Courtney, tell everybody, fill in the holes where if I missed anything about your whole journey into investments, law, finance, and weed.
So it all happened by accident. I am a philosophy, as you said, I'm a philosophy major, an undergrad, and I graduated and my intent was to go to law school directly. But I felt like Pitt's program, philosophy program, kind of vacillates between number 1 and number 2. And it was just a very intense experience. I was like, I need some time off. So I needed to get a job. And it's very hard to get a job with a philosophy degree. So I put my resume out there and I was picked up by American Express Financial Advisors. And they were like, hey, do you want to be a financial advisor? And I was like, sure. I didn't really have any other I didn't have any other options or any other offers. So ended up getting my Series 7, which is the general securities license. And I got a Series 66, which is basically the ability to charge people for my financial advice. And I had a life accident and health license. So I was a financial advisor for like all of 8 months. I hated it. I was doing $100 a day and I was like, this is terrible. I never want to do this again. So I ended up working at Sam's Club and Barnes and Noble, like part-time, like in order to find myself. But during that time, I actually got my first investment, which was Walmart, because Sam's Club is owned by Walmart. And I wasn't investing when I was a financial advisor because I couldn't afford it. So it was the first investment I ever made was in Walmart stock and was coming directly out of my check. Fast forward, I ended up getting into PNC and National City, which is a bank that actually is PNC now. Ended up working with them, and then I was recruited to Merrill Lynch. When I first went to Merrill Lynch, I went into 401k, so I became a 401k specialist, and then I moved on to high net worth advising. So I was promoted to assistant vice president. Life was good in 2007. Then 2008, the world, started crumbling down, and I was laid off in 2009 after Bank of America purchased Merrill Lynch. I took a little sabbatical, lived in the Philippines for a month, and I ended up going to law school in West Virginia in 2009. Worked as an oil and gas attorney when I graduated for one of the top energy firms in the nation. And I wanted to come home. There's no oil and gas in Philadelphia. So unfortunately I ended up coming home, ending working in tax. I ended up started getting my LLM. So I was like, well, what am I going to do? I love finance. I love all of this. And I was like, well, how do I make this work? And then kind of in 2014, I started the IB Investor. So I said, okay, how do I kind of make finance and law work together? So I ended up doing the LLM. So I have a Master of Laws and Taxation and a certificate in estate planning. So that's kind of how I got here. The IB Investor started in 2014. And it just basically started with a lot of my friends asking the same exact questions over and over again. And I was like, y'all, I have to bill. So I actually keep my job. So I can't be on the phone with people trying to do a rollover. So it just basically started as like a basic blueprint on how to do a rollover, how what insurance is, how it works. That's pretty much how it started. And then it kind of became this big thing where I've been speaking all over the nation. I've had, my blog posts have been picked up on podcasts. I've been on multiple podcasts. So it just really, really kind of became a lot bigger than whatever I expected, and just basically telling people how to do a rollover.
So basically you're a superstar.
I'm sorry?
Basically you're a superstar.
I'm a who?
Superstar.
I guess so.
Well, I'm glad you claimed it. So, all right, my very, very first question. Do you smoke weed?
I turned down my phone and I couldn't hear.
I thought you were on your laptop.
I am on my laptop, but my laptop was very loud.
Oh, okay. I said, do you smoke weed?
No.
So what gave you the interest in researching the marijuana industry?
A lot of people kept asking me about it.
So you're like me, because I don't smoke either, right? Because people ask me, well, do you smoke? Do you smoke? No, I don't smoke. And it's like, all right, well, what stock should we buy? So I know a lot of times we both get bombarded sometimes online. Well, I shouldn't say bombarded, but we get asked a lot of questions online about investment. So you kept getting questions about the marijuana industry.
All the time. And I was very much where you were in terms of risk management. I was like, yo, it's risky. This is a relatively, it's a very highly regulated industry. So where there's a lot of regulation and there's people that are kind of going against the grain, it creates a very uncomfortable investing environment. And there's never a sure shot in investing, but there's things that you basically want to avoid. So if you had a low riding car, you're probably not going to want to drive around in North Philadelphia for a while before they started.
Well, anywhere in Philadelphia for that matter.
Well, true. I mean, me and North Philadelphia have had our differences, but my car rides low, and I know there's certain streets that I'm not going to go down because I don't know what the terrain's going to be. And that's essentially what's going on with marijuana. There's certain lanes that I don't go down because I don't know what the train's going to be. Right.
Okay, so you clearly qualified on various angles, various levels. You were getting questions about marijuana and marijuana industry. So you started to do a deep dive on it. And so what did you discover?
Well, it's actually a lot more interesting than I thought. I think any kind of new industry has its kind of pitfalls, but marijuana became very elegant to me because there's a lot of legal implications there. Like when we talk about Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, it's kind of very novel, very new. But the United States or North America's kind of problem with marijuana stems back to like the 1800s. So it has all this history attached to it. And then you have kind of like basic regulations, and then you have states that are bucking the system.
Mm-hmm.
So
well, give us an instance about what happened in the 1800s that's made it so taboo.
So in the 1800s, there were a lot of kind of concoctions and elixirs, and concoctions and elixirs had anything in it.
Like Coca-Cola.
Like Coca-Cola, it had cocaine as an ingredient. And the reason, so what ended up happening is that in 1906, there came the Pure Food and Drug Act. The Pure Food and Drug Act required that if there was a substance in a particular, I don't know, anything that you use at all, right, it had to be listed on the bottle. Something very similar to what goes on now.
Right.
But what people started to see is they would start to see marijuana, and they would see it next to cocaine. And then they would say, oh, well, this person had this particular product and they became crazy. Not that they were just crazy in and of themselves, but that they became crazy. And what ended up happening is that they started kind of creating propaganda. So the propaganda started in the late 1800s, early 1900s about associating marijuana, the drug, with people of color. So they were associating it with Mexicans primarily because there were a lot of Mexicans migrating into the United States. But then they also started to, anything that was wrong in the world, this is maybe 40 years after slavery, they started associating drug use with African Americans to kind of pigeonhole them in a situation. So like post very similar to Jim Crow, if it wasn't Jim Crow specifically.
Right.
So that's kind of like the background on all the interesting things where the issues with marijuana started. Okay.
So did you find anything else interesting, like out of the way with this outside of course, smoking? Because, when people talk about marijuana investments, everybody's thinking about stoners and smokers, but it's actually a lot more involved than that. It's actually a lot more sophisticated than that as well.
Almost definitely. There's a lot of sophistication here. What did I find that was out of the way? I found that what was out of the way is that there was a very big hemp industry in a lot of Appalachian states, specifically Kentucky. And once everybody was pushing marijuana and they're like, no marijuana, they really killed the hemp industry. And hemp is amazing in terms of a textile. And basically when you have a cannabis plant that's good for hemp, it's not necessarily good for marijuana. Hemp grows in more of a colder climate. The cannabis, the bud of marijuana, or the cannabis plant, is actually where we get the marijuana, the flower portion. And we all talk about the sticky icky. The warmer the climate, the more sticky or more resonance that the plant is. So it's a little bit better. It's a little bit better to use for the purpose of getting the THC and smoking it.
So
hemp got mixed up in the mix. Go ahead.
So hemp and marijuana come from the same plant, from the same seed?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Definitely the same plant, just different. Hemp is more from like the stem or the stalk, but cannabis comes from the flower.
So it's basically the same thing. Okay.
Yeah, but it's just, it's like an environmental thing. And we'll talk about that kind of like with the picks and shovel thing. Mm-hmm. But it's more of environmental. The colder climates, you're going to get more of a hemp. The warmer climates, you're going to get more of a marijuana. Like some people say the best marijuana grows in California. Well, because it's hot and
right,
hot on most of the time. That's why you're going to get a decent marijuana product.
Okay. So you did your deep dive. You found out about the different weeds and the history of it. So when it stands now, what really stands out to you in terms of the industry?
Well, there's a couple of things that are going on. I think there's a push and pull. Well, there's definitely a push and pull between the federal government and state governments. Under the Obama administration, they pretty much had a hands-off model. Like, listen, as long as y'all are not doing anything illegal in addition to marijuana, we'll leave you alone. So if kids are involved in marijuana, then we have a problem. But if they're saying, listen, if you're just not doing anything else, we'll leave you alone. Do what you want. Be great. But on the other side, what I will say is that on the other side, what we'll have now is that the Trump administration is not as friendly. So we have a lot of problems in that vein.
Yeah, there's actually a bill, and there's a bill in Congress and Senate right now to strengthen up the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the 10th Amendment for states' rights. So supposedly there's a deal on the table because I forget his name. There's a congressman there's a senator from Colorado that's blocking all of the DOJ nominations for the White House. And he said, listen, this is the bill I want. I want to protect all states that are legalizing weed right now. I want to take the banking rules off the table, and I want the IRS rules off the table. But it can't get out of session. So it's hard. It's hard right now. But I know that's one thing that they're pushing for. But it seems like there's not enough will in Congress or Senate to really get it up to the floor to vote on it.
Oh, you're right. It's not going anywhere. I mean, they're going to try to. So, I mean, as we know, there's separation of powers, but there's also the supremacy clause. And so the separation of powers is, we don't really talk about it on the state level, but so you have your legislative branch, your executive branch, and you have your judiciary, and they're separate. But then also you kind of have tiers. So you have state has the power to regulate certain things, like property is something that's related to the state, like real property is related to the state. So they have first priority. But there's other like health, welfare, that's all under what they call the 10th Amendment. So anything that's not specifically given to the federal government, it belongs to the state. So there's that kind of gap there.
Right.
Now that we are getting into a place where traditionally the GOP wants a smaller government. Mm-hmm. But now they're kind of saying, well, if we have a smaller government and we allow the states to do what they want, then, we have these liberal states that are going to kind of really push their agenda when it comes to marijuana. Mm-hmm. And so that's what we're seeing. So that's why it's not getting anywhere, because now they understand the flip side of this advocating of states' rights. And I think it's just a very interesting, it's kind of like, oh, you liked it when you were using it to oppress people. But now that you're using it to kind of potentially put people in a better position, now all of a sudden you don't want to do it that way. Oh, okay. We see you. So right. I think that's a really interesting situation that's still going to continue to kind of flush out. And I don't think it's going to change under this administration. But I do think it's interesting that former GOP, what is his name? Somebody came out and they're working with the marijuana groups now. I'm like, was it Donor?
There's money. I'm not surprised. I'm sure many of them will change. The guy from Colorado is a Republican. So, many of them are going to change because there's too much money in there. And then once, they get a little foothold, more money will come through for lobbying as well. So marijuana has the potential to be a big lobbyist. But I do have my thoughts that big tobacco will come through and swoop up all of marijuana, or a lot of. Yeah, I saw a big transaction in England. So I feel more of that's going to happen.
Oh, most definitely. They're not slow. Let's keep it all the way funky. Big tobacco is no sense of nobody slow. And right. I think it's very interesting because there's a lot of things that they're saying is competition for marijuana, and it's not. You have pharma industry, you have big tobacco, and then you also have alcohol. And all of those companies that are kind of very strong in those industries are saying, oh, how do I get into marijuana? They're not thinking about, marijuana is going to mess me up. Yep. No, they're just like, how do I get in on this new industry that's going to make me a whole bunch of money?
Well, I think InBev or the Anheuser-Busch is already developing some kind of THC infused
drink. Oh, yeah. So they have one going. Yep. And then Constellation Brands is investing in Canopy, which is the biggest Canadian company.
Right, for right now. Yeah.
They have a minority stake there. Pharma, you had the Epidiolex or Epilex, which is GWH Pharmaceutical. They are a British company, and they had the first drug that was approved for by the FDA that actually uses CBD as opposed to synthetic CBD. Okay. So it's just a really, like, they just don't care. They're trying to get this coin.
Right. I mean, that's what it always boils down to anyway. It's about the almighty dollar. If anybody's just watching, just joining us, my name is Kumar Yellis. You're watching the Money Hour. We do the Money Hour every Wednesday from 7 to 8. Today we were a couple of minutes behind because we had some technical issues, so we'll go a little over 8 today. Courtney Richardson is joining us today, the Ivy investor, to explain to us how to make money in the marijuana industry. So, Courtney, what are some of the uses outside of smoking, obviously, right? What are some of the other uses for marijuana?
So there's medicinal uses. It helps a lot with a lot of, we'll say, autoimmune diseases, also with pain management. So there's a lot of medicinal uses. But then also, for the most part, I'm trying to think, I mean, recreational, there's a lot of people. So there's two aspects of marijuana. You have your CBD, and then you have your THC. The THC is psychoactive.
And what is CBD?
Afraid of the psychoactive. I'm sorry?
What is CBD?
CBD is cannabidiol or something like that. It's one of the active ingredients in, or it's like one of the primary ingredients in cannabis that kind of makes it do what it does. Okay. So it's used primarily on the medicinal side, the CBD, and that's where the CBD oil is coming in the drug that was approved by the FDA. That's what is the basis of their drug. It's CBD. And everybody's really afraid of the THC because they're like, oh, it has a like brain effect. I'm going to be very clear. And they feel like it has this effect to kind of make people crazy. It's still kind of like that old conversation that was from the early 1900s.
Okay. So it's the old stigma that's still alive.
I'm sorry?
It's the old stigma that's still alive.
Yeah, very much so. And somebody was asking on Instagram, and they were saying, hey, what does this matter for right now? And I tell people all the time, and I really run through the historical context because a lot of the historical context really still is alive right now. And you need to understand the history to get to the next level, to really understand what's going on. I tell people that all of the time. And people are like, oh, that's really corny. But I think that's the philosophical, the legal mind of me, is that I'm like, I really have to understand this background. Because when we go to court, sometimes we have to argue the background. But if you know anything about the law, you have Plessy versus Ferguson. It had a major, Plessy versus Ferguson is the law that established that constitutionally allowed separate but equal. But if you know the case that overturned Plessy versus Ferguson was Brown versus the Board of Education. But the dissent from Plessy was the majority in Brown versus the Board. So again, if you know the history, you see that bridge.
Yeah, I run into the same thing all the time. People get bored with the history, but they don't understand the history is the foundation. And if you start off with a weak foundation, you really don't have anything to build on. So I'm glad that you at least give the history, because the history gives the perspective into everything that's going on. So you have the weed that's coming out, the new drug that was approved by the FDA. And you were saying that the CBD is what's based on this new drug that was approved by the FDA. And so the THC is also active in a lot of some of the medicinals that are used too, right?
I don't think they're using THC at all, honestly.
At all?
Okay. Not what I'm reading. Because it still has a stigma. I mean, I think there are some things that really work well with the THC. I'm just plugging my computer. There's things that do work well with THC. But it's not being used actively because of the stigma. And I think there's some things that actually do better with the THC as opposed to the CBD. But since we can't get into that conversation because it still has that stigma, it really hurts people. And what I'm glad about is that pharma is actually on board. And once pharma is actually on board, I think we can have more of the medicinal conversation about on both sides of the CBD and the THC. And I hope that kind of changes the tide. But remember, marijuana is a Schedule I drug, which means that under the Controlled Substances Act of 1970, which remember, it was a Nixon thing. Nixon, and let's be very, very clear, You know,
Nixon
some
didn't
of
like
the
black people.
racial, go ahead.
Nixon didn't like black people.
Exactly. He ain't like the hippies either. So
Right.
his war on drugs was actually a war on black people, and it was a war on those who were against the war. And if you look at Nixon's memoirs, his people talk about it, and they're very clear about it. Even as in the 90s, they were having that conversation. I think there was an interview from 1994, and they said, listen, you know, we can't arrest people for being black, and we can't arrest people for being against the war, but we can arrest them with things that we associate with them, which is marijuana,
Right.
which was right or wrong.
Right.
But it's very frustrating because that was what the war on drugs did. So
now you talked about Schedule 1 drugs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Heroin is also a Schedule 1 drug.
Correct.
And many push back and say, how does it even make sense that heroin and marijuana are being compared in the same conversation?
Oh, it's terrible. But that was done on purpose. So the Schedule 1 drug, for clarity, Schedule 1 means it has no benefit medicinally or and it has a high, no benefit medicinally, and there's a high rate of abuse. And there's one more thing to it. So there's basically like a 3-prong test,
Right.
or 3-prong criteria for a drug to be moved to Schedule 1. And they're trying to reschedule it because they can't, the company GWPH Pharmaceuticals, they can't market their drug until it gets moved off of the Schedule 1 list.
Right.
So there's a conversation with the DEA about them changing the Schedule 1 now that the FDA says, hey, this particular drug is legit and it can help with epilepsy, because that's what the whole drug is for. The drug's helping with epilepsy. And they're saying that they're actually, so there is a proven medical use for it. Now it technically does not fall under Schedule 1, but they have to reschedule it, not just by existing and saying, the FDA saying, oh, this is a good thing. It has to be more than that. So the DEA has to reschedule.
Is that a lengthy process to reschedule?
It's not a lengthy process. It's that they don't want to do it.
Right. Gotcha. Now, is that an act of Congress or is that just the DEA?
I believe it's actually like a regulatory thing. So
Okay.
It would be the province of the agency which enforces the law. But I'm not 100% sure. I have to go back to that. And the problem is that you allow agencies to kind of interpret the laws that are they're bound to on their own. It's called Chevron deference. So there's a lot of stuff going on, but I'm pretty sure it's just a DEA issue, but I can't really say. Like Schedule 1 the Schedule 1 drug is set up in the law, but I think I don't think in the law specifically does it say, but it may just be a recommendation to Congress that they need to change it. I'm not sure.
Gotcha. Now, I know for myself, like I said, I wasn't super interested because of the law, the overall prevailing law of the land. But my uncle had cancer and he passed last November. And the only way he could eat or hold food down was if he got his weed. And then it really piqued my interest to say, wow, this stuff works. Because without it, he couldn't do anything many times. And that's why I started to look a little bit deeper into it. So clearly there are properties, there are benefits to it that are on the medicinal side, but the will just isn't there yet. Now, ironically, it seems like Canada and oddly the rest of the world is way ahead of the United States when it comes to this whole industry because they're going recreational in October. Do you understand why that is or what brought that about?
Canada just has it together. Canada, that's all I can say. I mean, Canada, but remember, Canada legalized nationally medicinal marijuana use in 2001. Mm-hmm. And there was a recent court case, it's called Alred versus Canada, which I think was 2016. And what was going on there is that they said it was encroached on their liberty on those patients that were able to actually ingest medicinal marijuana. They were saying it encroached on their liberty interest if they were not able to grow their own marijuana in-house. So, and that's what ended up happening. And they ended in Canada and the court agreed with them and they ended up changing the law about medicinal marijuana in Canada. And I think that opened the door for for them to say, okay, well, let's look at recreational marijuana. Now that we have people actually growing it in their house, how are we going to be able to really control it? And I think they also saw that was a money grab. I think they understood kind of the benefit of the industry. But again, we're looking at 17 years later from the national approval of marijuana. Now we're looking at recreation. So it took a long time.
Right. But I mean, I just read that the market in Canada alone is $5 billion, estimated to be $5 billion annually.
And that's even, and they're going to have a supply problem also, because remember, it takes about 3 to 5 months to grow marijuana. Mm-hmm. So even if once you flip the switch, you're saying, oh, we need to increase demand. Well, how? You have at least 90 days that you're going to have a lapse in supply, at least.
Right. Well, they have a couple companies up there now, I mean, that are doing medicinal. So, they plan on doing recreational as well. So they'll probably be some of the early leaders in the industry, at least in Canada. It'll be interesting to see how it goes, though, going forward.
There's a couple that I think, like Canopy. I mean, Canopy is the biggest. There's one that's run by Cronos. Cronos is actually run by an American. There's a couple that really can get somewhere based on their setup. They're going to definitely be early leaders.
I mean, Tilray is even ran by Americans. I mean, technically their headquarters is in Seattle.
Yeah. Tilray's interesting a little bit.
Yeah.
But they have a holding company too. So their holding company is actually in America. They have a lot going on. When I looked at their S1, I was like, okay, because I was trying to figure out how we got here, because they were the first marijuana company in an IPO. And I said, well, how did you do that, given that you are engaged in your main business is illegal in the United States?
Right. They figured it out, though. That's why I like it. Plus, they have worldwide distribution. So that was
my biggest concern. I think we're off.
What's that?
So I think we're off the list.
Oh.
But either way, so I think that was one of the things that really caused a lot of problems.
Okay. So
is that I was like, well, I don't understand how you're able to do that, because the other two that are now publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange and the NASDAQ were already traded on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Mm-hmm. So I was like, well, how do we get here? And then when I started to read through it, but I think somebody earlier, maybe yesterday, day before yesterday, was talking about how Canadian nationals are having that invest in American cannabis companies are getting stuck at the border.
Yep, they're getting denied access.
So I just think that's an interesting setup going on now.
And I'm sure that since the Canadian president and the 45 don't like each other, we're disconnected. Okay, and 45 don't like each other. I'm sure that doesn't help anything.
No, I mean, yeah. Well, I don't like. Shoot, I mean, it's a whole mess. It really is a whole mess, and I think they are. And the article that I read, it was specifically trying to have a chilling effect on the industry. Not allowing Canadian nationals into the country if they're engaged, if they're basically funding an illegal enterprise in the United States. That's the right that they have. That's a huge, that legally they are correct. It's border control, and they have a right to prohibit anyone who is funding any legal activity in the United States, to prohibit them from coming in. Now remember.
But this is the question. Are they investing in Canada and weed companies, or are they investing in America and weed companies?
American weed companies.
Okay.
That's what's going on.
Okay. So tell me this, what's the best way for somebody to make money, a regular Joe Schmo, to make money in the marijuana industry today?
Invest in Canadian companies. And the reason why I say Canadian companies.
So wait a minute, they shouldn't be thinking about buying a dispensary or a grow company, maybe doing some edibles. They shouldn't, none of that on the American side?
No, and the reason being is that, one, they could get shut down at any time. I mean, this administration is very unclear exactly how they're going to move on this, but they can be shut down at any time and you lose all your money. And that's on the investing on the stock market side, because they are on the pink sheets. But some of the companies that are distilleries and all this, they are listed they're listed on the pink sheets and not on the NASDAQ or New York
Right.
Stock
On
Exchange.
the main board.
They could be shut down at any time. So you don't want to put yourself, again, we were talking about that unnecessary risk. There's always going to be risk investing in the stock market, but why would you put yourself in a position to say, okay, I'm just rolling the dice because tomorrow the feds could come in and shut this down.
Right.
And there's a lot of just general problems with the feds. There's a lot of just general problems with the feds. I should say that because it's not federally, if you have a federal charter as a bank, you cannot knowingly taking illegal funds.
Right.
So that makes marijuana a very heavy cash business. So anytime you have a whole bunch of cash floating around, and it causes a lot of problems. I mean, you have anything from theft to kind of just and now you have to get a lot more security because you have cash everywhere.
Right. I mean, many of them in Colorado have armed guards 24/7. So.
Oh, most definitely. That's all that's all you can do. I mean, that's pretty much all you can do is have armed guards all the time because that's all you have is cash. Now you can, there is conversation that you can go to a bank that has a state charter as opposed to a federal charter.
Right. So
in Pennsylvania, that would be Citizens Bank. Citizens Bank has a state charter. So that would be something. I don't know where the other state charter bank, but any bank that's a comma NA, which would be a national association, you wouldn't be able to put money there that they know you got from marijuana. Right.
And, that was why they were so kind of excited about this bill that's not going to make it to the floor, because it was going to make it possible to do banking at national chartered banks and also alleviate some of the IRS issues that come along with being a marijuana company as well. So it was really issue. So you say invest in Canadian companies. That's the best bet for average everyday people who don't have a couple $1 million, because I believe to do a grow company in Pennsylvania, it's somewhere between $1 million and $2 million.
Yeah.
And that's not even before you get, the license. So it takes a lot to get it through. But the average everyday person can buy stock in Canopy or stock in Tilray or some of the other marijuana stocks that are in Canada.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
And I think I think I am frustrated with the amount of capital that's required.
Well, that's strategic. I mean, that's intentional.
Definitely.
And it's intentional.
Almost definitely.
Yeah.
So that bothers me a lot. Like that's like how to get me upset is just to really kind of cripple people because you really don't need that much cash. And there's also rules that these companies can't go bankrupt. I thought that was really interesting too. I was like, for real? So you're really putting people you're prohibiting people from getting involved.
Well, I guess because they are operating a quote unquote criminal enterprise.
Right.
So they wouldn't get the protections of bankruptcy court because it's federal. So right. I get that. And I only play a lawyer on social media. So see how fast I pick on.
Yeah, but you are right. But I just think it's interesting. I just think it's interesting. And I think, again, it's the vestige of the old system is that you're like, well, how do we exclude people from being involved in this? Well, we kind of targeted you and you can't have a record. Mm-hmm. So you've targeted people of color on two fronts. You targeted them and you said, hey, you need a lot of money to put into this. And unfortunately, a lot of people of color don't have that major cash to really invest. I mean, and that's people across the board. Right. Then on top of that, you've targeted us for the last 30, 40 years.
30, 40 years? What are you talking about? 400 years. I mean, it's not a laughing matter, but right.
Under the war on drugs.
Targeted. Right.
So you've been targeting us under the war on drugs for the last 30, 40 years. And now you're saying, okay, well, you're out now and you have a great opportunity. But, oh, no, not you who we've targeted. Mm-hmm. You can't get involved in this at all because you have a record. And it's like, for real. So it's these, like I said, it's the vestiges of the old system. Is that how do we exclude Black people? How do we exclude people of color when we put them in this bad situation to begin with?
How can people of color or Black people overcome that?
Well, it really depends. I mean, you have to get your money up. That's the big thing. That's pretty much the biggest thing. I mean, in terms of, I also think lobbying. I think lobbying really changed the laws. I mean, my thing is if you're going to legalize marijuana in a state, and I think this is going on in Seattle now, they're having this conversation. If you're going to legalize marijuana, then you need to let everybody out. You need to basically expunge all these non-violent drug offenders. If all of a sudden that had marijuana charges, now all of a sudden it's cool, it's avant-garde, it's in vogue, and they're not going to be able to get any types of benefit from the system that imprisoned or incarcerated them. That's not fair.
Right.
So I think the one side is the lobbying, really getting involved on the lobbying on the political side, but then also you have to get involved on the economic side. And I think getting your money up in terms of real estate, in terms of stock market, doing those things that's going to get you more money, so you put you in a position of power. I think that's the long-term plan. I think the short-term lobbying, long-term plan is building economic wealth, but you talk about that all the time. So
I do. I don't know if anybody's listening, but I do. But let's go back to the individual person, right? Because lobbying is going to take a group effort and big money effort. Even the dispensaries and the grow companies are going to take big money, but your individual investor can buy stock, right?
Right.
So is there any companies that you like more than others? Even some of the medical companies that are here in the States that are operating just purely from a medicinal standpoint?
I don't like anything operating in the United States.
Okay.
I just don't. I think it's unnecessary risk where it is right now. And since
we talked about that earlier, right? But break that down again, just really simple and plain when you say unnecessary risk.
So the unnecessary risk is that when you normally have a business, you have a business of going out, you have a business that could be profitable or you have a business that could not be profitable. Okay, that's kind of like the cost of doing business. That's just regular business. But now you have a business that could potentially be profitable, but the United States government can come in and shut the whole operation down because it's illegal under the United States, under the federal law. So even though, and to talk about, the supremacy clause, even though it may be legal in the state, it's not legal on the federal government side. So again, the federal government at any point can come into a state and shut it down to say, we're the supreme law of the land. This is illegal under our law. We don't care what the state is doing. You be blessed. We're shutting you down. So then you lose, as an investor, you lose your investment. They're not going to say, oh, we're shutting you down. Let's make sure that we're distributing the proper proceeds to the investors. No, it's an illegal enterprise. They're going to take it. They're going to take all the money. They're going to put it wherever they put it. And that's it. So that's unnecessary risk. So I don't think anybody should be, especially as a new investor, should be taking on that type of risk. So where you don't have that type of risk is in Canada. Canada has now, so they've had medicinal marijuana that's been legal since 2001. Now they have recreational marijuana will be legal. It's legal technically now, but it goes live in
October. Yeah.
So again, that's a really good spot to be. So you said, well, what about United States, medicinal companies? Like, no, but what about Canadian medicinal companies? Yes, that's a good thing. Make sense?
Yeah. Everybody who's asking questions, just hold your questions until, well, not hold them. You can ask them, but we'll get back to them at the end once we're finished the conversation. Again, if you're just joining us, this is the Money Hour. We are in studio, or not in studio. We're being joined by Courtney. I'm used to being on the radio. We're being joined by Courtney Richardson, the Ivy investor, and she did a deep dive on the marijuana industry, and she actually has a master class that she has as well that she offers to a lot of people who want to dig even deeper into it and figure out the best ways to go about it, figure out ways that you won't lose your shirt when you begin to invest. Because listen, we all work hard for our money. Nobody has time to lose money unnecessarily without proper planning and research. So Courtney can definitely help us all with that. So Canada is the best place to go. Now, I like Tilray because they're international. They're one of the first internationals. Have you seen any other companies that are distributing weed on an international scale?
Canopy is international. They have
I think they're mainly. I thought they're mainly in Canada.
No.
All right.
They're also in. I believe they're also in Israel. They have a couple of holdings in Europe, and then they also have something in Israel. So
did y'all see the shade Courtney just threw me? This is what we go through all the time.
Oh my God.
It's all good. So Canopy. All right. Who else you got? Anybody else?
Internationally, actually on the picks and shovels play, You have.
Well, hold on. Katie still turns out there not explaining.
I was about to get there.
What's picks and shovels?
So picks and shovels. So in the 1850s or 1849, when the California gold rush happened, is that everybody was trying to run out to California and strike gold. But one of the things that you needed to strike gold, whether you struck gold or not, you needed an axe and you needed a pick and you needed a shovel because you needed to dig for gold. So the people who really made out like fat rats were the people who were selling ancillary things to, getting gold. So like jeans, I was about to say, jeans was a big thing because you had to kind of protect your legs with a really strong material. So denim was a big thing. Like I said, you had your picks, you had your shovels, you had your axes. So those people made out amazingly. Right. Whether the person was actually successful in digging for gold or finding gold or not, they still, these kind of people on the side still made a lot of money. Right. So the same concept applies when it comes to investing. Is a function of, okay, kind of who's making money based on kind of participating in the industry, but not necessarily a grow company or a greenhouse or whatever, or a distributor. So kind of how else can they make money? So I think it's really interesting that, and I don't really know if I want to call Philip Morris a picks and shovels kind of play, but Philip Morris is a tobacco company. They're Altria Group. Their symbol is MO on the stock exchange. But what they have been doing is their Israeli company, like their Israeli arm or their European arm, I don't know, one of their arms of the company that's over across the pond, they have patented a strain of cannabis, and they also have a stake in a company that makes 3D cannabis kind of paraphernalia or apparatus. So
like 3D printing type stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So just kind of really interesting stuff. So I don't know if I wouldn't count them necessarily in cannabis, but I've seen kind of how they're starting to make their moves. And even if it's not going to be legal in the United States for who knows how long, they're at least kind of positioning themselves in other places where it is.
Right. So, I mean, what else would you consider picks and shovels? And before I go into that little investment fun fact, right? Courtney talked about picks and shovels and we talked about jeans. Levi's really made their money during the gold rush and is still around to this day. I can't really name any gold mining companies that are still around to this day. So, think about the opportunity, but also think about the main opportunity like the gold or the weed, but also think about everything else that it takes to put together a grow house or to put together a dispensary. I mean, they have edibles now. I see people talking about edibles delivery, all different kinds of stuff. So there's all different kinds of things. So what else have you seen, Courtney, in terms of
Scott's Miracle Gro is a really big one that everybody talks about.
I've been meaning to look at that because they make the grassy, not weed grass, right? Not marijuana grass, but like for your lawn, right? So now they're doing something.
Well, they purchased Hawthorne. Hawthorne so they have 3 lines of business. One of their lines of business is Hawthorne, which is a hydroponics company. And but let's remember how we had a big conversation about how weed grows best in the warmer climates. Ain't nothing warm about Canada. So you're going to have to take your growing indoors to actually make sure that you are warm enough to create a good experience or a good growing environment for this weed. So Scott's has, so you have 2 options about where you're going to grow your weed. You can either grow it in soil or you can grow it in water. But it seems to be a lot easier to grow in water because you can really monitor the nutrients and kind of
humidity. You can probably control humidity.
Correct. Right. So there's a lot of things that lend to hydroponics being a really good way to grow. Now there's also some commentary that hydroponics weed tastes different or has a different flavor.
That hydro.
Than soil in terms of like people prefer if they said, if I had a choice, I would like weed that was grown in soil as opposed to hydro, but I mean, whatever. But that's pretty much the best environment for it to grow because the soil also helps kind of produce vermin or kind of attract vermin more so. So there's a couple different reasons why you might want to go with hydroponics as opposed to soil.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I can see that because every soil is different. And that's even with food, it will help give it a different taste and texture.
Yeah, so the
So,
soil they're using is like a coconut husk or something soil, or something like that. It's pretty much like, I would think it's like the most vanilla type soil you can use, and they do a lot of injection of their own nutrients to kind of create the environment that they want.
so is weed now a GMO, a genetically modified seed?
I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say it was a GMO. And the reason why I say is that it's not a GMO because it's not being genetically modified. Well, I mean, as I can tell, let me clarify, as I can tell, I wouldn't call it GMO at this point. Like I said, there was a strain that was patented by Philip Morris's like European branch or whatever. So that's an interesting kind of setup, but I'm not sure how they got there. I don't think they're genetically modifying as it stands right now. A lot of what they've been doing is just kind of taking the plant and then cutting and then kind of moving from there, but not doing anything that I can tell on the lab level other than just growing.
No, I got you.
But that may be, I mean, that may potentially be down the road.
Yeah, I'm looking at Scott's Miracle Gro right now. Ticker symbol SMG, and it's $74.13.
Yeah, but my only concern about Scott's is that the Hawthorne is pretty much their only profitable arm. So that's something that does concern me as an investor. It's like, yeah, you know, we're hype on Hawthorne, but what is the rest? They have a consumer side and there's like another section. I'm like, y'all are not really doing well. And there's probably a lot of reasons for that. But that's a general concern of like, do I really want to invest in this company if they have only one arm that's productive? Now, if they said, oh, we're going to spin off Hawthorne, it's going to be its own publicly traded company, I'm like, oh, okay, well, now we're cooking and now I'm going to have a different look at it. But I mean, it's still on my list, but it's not like really, really high on my list. Also, you need lights. So lighting is something that you may want to look into also. It seems that they were doing what's called like a high pressure system of lighting, but it's very costly and it's very hot. If you know anything about the law, is that there was a couple of legal cases that were checking
The heat signatures.
Yes,
Yeah.
off a lot. Those high pressure lights were kicking off a lot of heat. So you could tell the houses that were using them because their electricity bill was crazy and they were kicking off a lot of heat. Oh, okay, we know what you're doing there.
Well, I believe the case said they had helicopters coming through using infrared, and I think they said that was unconstitutional. Something like that.
Yes, they were saying it was an illegal search and seizure. I don't remember what the holding of the case was, honestly. I remember reading it in criminal procedure. I think it was unconstitutional, but I don't remember. But remember, this was under the Roberts court. So there's a lot of things that, like, if it was under the Warren Court, and the Warren Court is Brown versus Board of Education, Miranda, Roe v. Wade. That's your Warren Court, very liberal. But the Roberts Court was more conservative. So I'm not sure. And they were doing a lot of pulling back of what we consider to be basic constitutional tenets and liberties under the Roberts Court. So I give you that background and say offhand, I don't remember. Gotcha.
Okay. So I just looked up Canadian stocks and Cronos, wait a minute, where's the ticker symbol at? So Canopy, of course, number one, is a $6.1 billion company. Ticker symbol is CGC.
And that just happened. It just got on the American Stock Exchange in the last couple of months.
No, they're on an NYSE.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. They just went to because they were originally on the Toronto Stock Exchange, and then still on. They're dually traded on both.
Got you. Aurora Cannabis. That's a pink sheet, right? So that's a over the counter when you see OTC. That's ACBFF.
Yeah.
Alpha.
So, but there's a couple of funds that actually have it in their. There's a mutual fund and there's a spider that actually has it in their holdings.
And so when you say a spider, you're talking about an ETF, right?
Yep, ETF. So mutual fund and ETF that have it in their holdings. So I share that with people in my class.
Okay. So ETF for everybody, it stands for, oh my God.
Exchange Traded Fund.
Wow.
It's late.
Some call me an expert on that, but oh my God, that's bad. But okay. So tell everybody about your class, how they can find it, what they can expect to learn, and how much it is.
Okay, so my class is, the class is set up basically kind of like our conversation. I do have a conversation about the legal landscape. And I know you're probably like, oh, that's because you're an attorney. Probably. But I think the legal landscape is very...
Hey, that's part of your superpower, though.
So I think, but I do think it's very, very important to understand because, like I said, I take a very strong position that I don't fool with any United States companies because it's not legal. Mm-hmm. Because I just don't want you just taking my coin just because you decide to shut it down one day. I'm cool. But I give you that background. I kind of give a little bit of the history of the industry. So again, we know where it's coming from. Because I like people to understand. So if you understand the logic of where kind of the beginning or the genesis of something, you can kind of see like history repeats itself. So you can kind of see what's going to happen on the other side. Right. And then we start talking about companies. We started to talk about like what I call a direct play, which are cannabis companies that are growing cannabis. I also talk about picks and shovels as we talk about kind of the ancillary kind of companies that are involved with the process somewhere. And then I'll also talk about what we call pooled investments. So we have mutual funds and ETFs. So pooled investments are investments that have kind of a basket of cannabis companies. So I talk about the ones that I actually like. And then I also talk about, and then I provide a PDF. It's about 15 pages of all the companies that I talked about on the, so it's kind of like a takeaway. So you don't have to keep going back to the video to get
your study guide.
Yeah, it's like a study guide.
Okay.
And then also provide a little bit of information about Stockpile. Stockpile, I really like it as a beginning investor because you can kind of, what you can do is you can put in a product and say, Barbie doll, and then Miss Hell will come up. Mm. So I like that concept. But also Stockpile, I have an affiliate code that you can get $5, towards the stock. So I like Stockpile for that reason. And there's about 10 companies that are affiliated with marijuana that are purchased on stock, that you can purchase on Stockpile. So I pretty much talk about that, and I just pretty much try to give people a roadmap. I can't tell you everything that's going to happen. I have no idea. I just try to keep it all, like I said, all the way funky. I try to keep it very, very, honest, because I feel like there's a lot of things that can happen in this industry like overnight. And I want people to watch for developments and kind of be like a student of the industry. If you're interested in investing in marijuana, that's great. But I really want you to like be on it. I want you to have Google alerts about marijuana. I want you to have Google alerts about cannabis. And I want you to read it. And I want you to become a student, because that's where everybody wants to like pop on and make a lot of money. But you have to be an early adopter. But if you understand the industry, you know what's going to pop, what the industry needs, like where the gaps are. And versus, what's kind of like, oh, that's kind of cute. Now, granted, there's stuff that's kind of cute that pops anyway. We don't know. But I really like to focus on places where a company is actually filling a need of the industry.
Right. That makes sense. So how much is it and where can they get it?
Okay. So for your people, we worked out a deal, $35?
Yes, ma'am.
And
I had to twist their arm for that, folks. This is like $100 product.
So we did $35. So I will drop that link after we get off. And they can watch so it's online, it's on demand. You can watch it at any time. And then people tend to like reach out to me and say, hey, I have an additional question, or hey, what do you think about this? And we have that conversation. But like I said, I really try to give you a roadmap of where you should be going, where you should be looking forward, because I really want people to be a student of this industry.
Right. Now, it's funny. Somebody said to me earlier when they saw this, they said, well, Kamar, you do investments, so why would you bring Courtney onto your platform to talk about investments? And to me, there is no real competition. We can't all cover everything. We can't all know everything. So me and Courtney will chop it up and we'll share notes on certain things. And, our belief is there's enough money out here for everybody. I mean, the stock market is a multi-trillion-dollar industry. So there's more than enough. And, if Courtney meets somebody from me, and she'll introduce me to somebody from her, and vice versa. So it's all love. So, think about how you can collaborate and do things with people. Courtney, any last comments before we go? Because we got questions to answer, right?
Oh my gosh. Yay. I love questions.
Yeah.
I really love them. I don't think so. I mean, I think we covered a lot, and I'm sure their questions are probably going to be stuff that we didn't cover. So.
Okay. So Scott Phil says you have to look at additional ancillary type industries, also farming, water, educational, laboratory. So that's kind of like the picks and shovels as well. So we talked about that. Also, we said non-traditional banking. So I guess Scott was talking about how some of these companies can get around some of the national problems with banking. Okay, Aisha Parker said there's a company called Jarvis that's making stock investments for only $4.97. Can you speak on that? I've never heard of that before. Have you heard of that before?
Yeah.
Jarvis? Okay.
Can you look it up?
Yeah, I'm gonna look it up real quick.
I've never heard of this. And I mean, there's always something. The industry is so big and so vast that there's always something going on, but I've never heard of Jarvis. Now, in terms of low cost trading, did Fidelity bring their numbers down again? I think.
Yeah, Fidelity's got a whole bunch of new mutual funds they're launching without any fees. I don't know if there's any marijuana ones specific for marijuana.
Yeah. Fidelity, I think they're trading at $4.95. I think Ally is doing $4.90. Ally is doing $4.99 trades also.
Oh, for direct trades. Okay, yeah.
Direct trades. However, when I was looking through Ally to do a lot of the marijuana stocks that were ending in F, which are the foreign stocks were traded on the pink sheets,
right,
they're available. So there's only like Charles Schwab, Fidelity, and there's like one more that's actually allowing you to make these trades with these pink sheet companies.
You couldn't do it on E-Trade or?
I think E-Trade is, but I knew that Ally wasn't. So
Okay. Nikki Smith Bagby says, I'm tagging in the one of the only African American growers in PA. Well, Nikki, if you can let me know about that, I would really appreciate that. I would love to talk to them, actually. And Zinga Good said, thank you for doing the show, Kamari and Courtney. Actually, and Zinga's the one who put me on blast, everybody.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Mozzie Harris says, stay away from Jarvis. It's a scam. So he says it's a scam. I hope I'm saying your name right. Aisha Parker, FB suggested this group, and it was a marketing group, but it couldn't see spending this kind of money. Oh, sorry, I couldn't see spending this kind of money on a group I've never heard of. I mean, I think what it sounds like, and I haven't looked it up yet. I'll definitely look it up in a minute. But it sounds like maybe it was a group of people who got together and said they're going to invest, and maybe this was the minimum investment or what they wanted as an investment. And I'm sure you'll see people do that more and more and pooling their funds. But you got to be careful with that because a lot of times they're not regulated. And not to say that everything has to be regulated, but when it's not regulated, you want to be extra careful and you want to know the people who you're dealing with. You want to know their background, their pedigree, and the whole nine.
Exactly. And you can invest in marijuana stocks. I mean, you can get in the industry, not with a whole bunch, but like as little as $25. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really important. I think one of the barriers to investing is that people feel like they need to invest a whole bunch of money to get started, and you don't have to, especially in the marijuana industry. Now, that's why you also have to do a lot of research and a lot of due diligence. And I talk about this in my class, is that a lot of these companies are not positive yet. They are not actually working in the black yet. A lot of them are still losing money. Right. They're burning through money.
Yep. Okay, Paulette Porter says, I would like more information. Is their website or some other way to get information? So, Courtney, maybe you can give them your website or your link now.
Okay.
You can pop that and tag Paulette. Okay. Aisha Parker asked, she said they spoke of pot coin. I think I've heard of that, but I haven't really looked into it super tough. I mean, everybody's creating a coin these days. Okay. Potcoin is a peer-to-peer cryptocurrency which exists with the aim of becoming the standard form of payment for the legalized cannabis industry. And that came to be in 2014. That's interesting. You know, all coins are not the same. You have to do your research. I like crypto. Some people have called me a Bitcoin hater, and that's not the case. But I will talk trash, a little bit of trash about Bitcoin and fun, right? I do it all in fun because everybody thought, when Bitcoin was at 20,000, that it was going to be like the next Black Jesus coming, and it was going to take everybody to salvation, and that wasn't the case. And like Courtney mentioned earlier, when you study history with people that are really serious about investing, especially long-term investing, we're always looking at history. We're looking at patterns. And so I did several videos about this, about how now is not a good time to buy Bitcoin. Now, from a year ago, I think Bitcoin was like $3,000. So yeah, if you got it a year ago, but if you were seeing when it was getting hot around that September, October, November, December phase, it was like, oh, this is something we don't need to touch right now. And so that's when people were starting to call me out on things. All right. So Maziar says Boyce Watkins was promoting it, and it was discovered that it was owned by a white guy with no financial experience, and they were charging black investors an excessive amount of money. The videos are on YouTube. So Mazi, I'm assuming you're talking about that Jarvis, right? Okay. Well, if it's documented, it's documented. That's all I can say. It's Potcoin like real Bitcoin. I can't really speak to Potcoin, outside of what I just Googled real quick. Okay, Emma Riri Barnes said, Miss Richardson, please tag her when you put the link on there.
Okay, I'm with everybody. I'm like trying to look at it. Kamari, should I tag them in yours?
Yeah, tag them on my post.
Okay.
Because I guess they're watching. I'm not sure where they're watching, and I know we're shared in a couple of groups.
It's like, where do we go? Okay.
So just go to my page, Kamari Ellis, the Financial Rebel.
Okay, got you.
Yeah, there you go. You did it already.
I did. Okay, great. Having problems.
Yeah. Does Courtney do one-on-one investment training?
I do. I'm actually doing a investment. If you're in Philly, I'm doing an investment brunch September 16th. And I'm doing a one-on-one investment training. I'm doing my signature Stocks 101 class, but then we're also talking about makeup, which isn't really applicable to the marijuana conversation, but we're looking at the makeup industry just like I look at the marijuana industry. So we'll be doing that in Radnor from 1 to 4. I can drop the link, but.
Yeah, drop the link. Sharing is caring.
Sharing is caring. So I'll drop the link.
And for anybody that's just joining you or joining the Money Hour, we're talking with Courtney Richardson, the Ivy investor, about marijuana stock and marijuana investing. I'm Kamari Ellis. If you're just now joining us, share this out. Again, sharing is caring. Let other people know about investments and the risk of investing and the potential benefits of investing. The stock market is the most, how do I like to say this? The stock market is the best performing investment or asset class of the last 100 years. So I know a lot of people love real estate. They love everything else, but stocks are where it's at. Real estate's where it's at too, but stock is where it's really at.
And I think it's really important to talk about a couple of things about understanding risk, because you talked about that. And I think a lot of people, when they get excited about, they get excited about the stock market, they get excited about real estate, and they don't really appreciate the other side, which is the risk.
Yep.
And I love that we have the conversation. And I'm team stock market generally. I just think the stock market has a lower barrier to entry if you're just starting out now, but also I'm all about diversification. And I think the industry talks about diversification when it comes to, having a lot of stocks and having multiple mutual funds or having multiple holdings, as we call them, in paper assets. I'm not necessarily a fan of that. Like, I want you to have multiple stocks that you understand and know and all of that. But I also think the way you diversify, like true diversification, is when you are looking at, when you have a stock portfolio, when you have a real estate portfolio, you have other things that are going on that are generating income, not just one thing.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree with that in a way that the overall industry promotes diversification really isn't diversification. It's just sales tactics, but that's a whole other conversation we could have another day. But again, I do agree with you. You should definitely understand diversification, real diversification. You want to have investments that zig when one investment is zagging. And that's one of the things that people don't talk about. They'll sell you a bunch of different mutual funds, but they're all moving in the same direction. And so again, that's not really diversification. And so I've gotten into situations where people think I'm bashing diversification, but I'm actually talking about what the standardized form or what the promoted form of diversification is at this point. Did you share your links, Courtney? There was some questions on IG. I don't know if I can get those back though.
Okay, I'm sorry, my phone died. My phone is just dies. It dies all the time. It dies all the time. I actually need to get a new phone.
Well, I know there was another question about industry risk or something like that Molly had asked.
Okay.
Millie had asked.
I did ask that. And I think we kind of covered the industry risk and the industry aspect.
Okay.
I don't know. Is there anything you want to add about industry risk?
Well, no, I was trying to find the actual question so I could speak to it. That's all.
I can try.
Yeah, I don't think I can get to it right now.
My shady phone. Sorry about that.
Nah, it's all good. I can't get to it now. Does anybody else have any other questions? All right, great. So we got Courtney's Investment Brunch, and we also have Courtney's Masterclass on marijuana investing. Wonderful. Now, it's so funny now. I can see your two links, but I can't see the questions now.
I couldn't see them either. And I thought that was really funny. I was like, I know there were questions there, and I just couldn't, for the life of me, find the questions. And I was like, okay, I see.
I got them. Okay,
you got them.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, multiple streams of income. Robbie L. Mathis, you're saying they're both medicinal. What exactly are you talking about when you say they're both medicinal? And please forgive me if I butchered your name. I never want to butcher anybody's name. You should hear how people just butcher my name with reckless, with no regard whatsoever. Don't even care. I'm not going to try to say, Nikki McDowell asks, what's the best marijuana stock to invest in? I would say the best marijuana stock to invest in is the best marijuana stock for you.
Yeah.
There are some that that may have some things you like. For example, I'll talk about mine. And for the record, this whole conversation is for educational and entertainment purposes. If you take this is not investment advice. If you pursue any investments, please speak to an investment and tax advisor. I have to give that disclaimer because I don't want none of y'all trying to sue me because y'all went and bought something that I ain't tell y'all to buy, or try to sue Courtney for buying something she ain't tell you to buy, because people sue all the time. I do like Tilray. I've talked about it. I think I mentioned earlier that I brought it. Just disclosure. I like the worldwide appeal of it. It has some advantages that other companies like Canopy don't have. But as Courtney said, Canopy is the bigger of the two companies. So you had to really dig and do some homework. And I would also say take Courtney's class, because she's going to give you some suggestions about not just how to buy stock, but there's other ways to buy weed investments or marijuana investments as well, like she talked about the pooled investments. And so I was supposed to do a class a long time ago and a whole research report. I just never got to it. But Courtney did it. Yeah, Courtney did it. So
took a lot, and I started looking at it through different angles. So it really could be like a 3-hour long class about marijuana and kind of all the different ways about it, because I think it's really important that you, like I said, you understand the industry and how they make money. And I think once you understand the industry and how they make money, again, you're able to see where there's holes. And there's a lot of holes in the industry, especially in the distribution chain. There's a lot of holes.
But I'm sure you're going to point out those holes in your class, right, from where you see it, right?
Yeah, we talk about them a little bit, but I haven't really gotten deep into it because I know there's distribution issues, because what's going on now is the growers or the companies are actually also the distribution train. But as time goes on and they get more demand, they're going to have to outsource to distribution. They're going to have to. And I think that's where the opportunities are going to be, but they're not there yet because, again, Canada doesn't go live with recreational marijuana until October.
Right.
So we're not going to probably see the problems of the problems are the increased demand, and probably until like first quarter 2019, second quarter 2019.
Right. Okay. Samantha Banks said, I invested in some of the companies, GW Pharmaceuticals, SMG, CREE and IIPR. I don't think I've ever heard of IIPR. I've heard of the others.
Is a REIT that actually it's a United States REIT that focuses on marijuana companies that basically that have real estate needs. So
that's a pick and shovel then.
Yeah, it's like a pick and shovel play.
So they're providing the facilities to do the grow, I'm assuming.
Correct.
That's smart.
And they're only in a couple of states, which I thought was really interesting. They're based out of Maryland. Let me clarify. Their docs are out of Maryland, but they're based out of California. And a lot of REITs, for some reason, are in Maryland. And I'm not really sure what the tax laws are that make Maryland such an interesting place for REITs, or a more kind of, I guess, good place for REITs. I'm not sure, but a lot of REITs, for some reason, are in Maryland.
There must be some loophole.
There's definitely some loophole. What it is, I don't know. I have to look into it.
Yeah, that's interesting. That's very interesting. All right, folks. Well, if that is all, no more questions. Every week I do this show, the Money Hour, 7 to 8, because one, I feel that there isn't enough business investment and money programming out in the world. So that's one of the things that I'm passionate about. If you want to continue the conversation with me, you could always join my free Facebook group, the Finance Rebel Academy. I'm in there pretty often. I'm answering questions as much as possible. And it's totally free. And you also get to engage with some other people who are looking to not just invest, but also increase their overall financial IQ. It's not enough to just be financially literate. We need more financial mastery. So come on over and join us in the Financial Rebel Academy, and we'll have a good time. Until next week, the Money Hour will return from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m., same Facebook time,